To nobody's surprise, the Florida Panthers are the favorites to win the Stanley Cup again.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, July 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. Today on the show, we are going to discuss the betting favorites for the NHL on the Panthers being the favorites once again, and how the Panthers really threw a wrench in everything when it came to free agency. We're also going to discuss the recent history of cap casualty trades across the NHL in the last 5 years, and also how the Panthers should do right by Evan Rodrigues, as he is the one who is expected to be the cap casualty for the Florida Panthers. So all this talk when it came to, I mean, this was around like January, February, when all the talk was about how the cap was going to rise by significantly, with which recently we saw 88 million for the NHL, and now this year it's 95.5. Next year it's going to be 104, and then the year after is going to be 113.5 million for the salary cap on what it's going to look like the next 3 years. And to think that with the exponential growth for the salary cap and what the landscape is going to look like for the NHL, the fact that the Florida Panthers have locked the core up, it really does help when it comes to putting more of the depth pieces around the team in the coming years, when it comes to even third line guys that you're going to have to pay for down the line. When it comes to that, in recent years, you would think, okay, $1 or $2 million here. Now you could possibly afford to pay him around like $3-4 million in order to be part of your middle six or even your second or third pair D in the future. And it's crazy to think how calculated, once again, that Bill Zito continues to be in these. But it's also crazy to think that with the amount of talk around the NHL, and myself included, when discussing about the other teams that were scheduled to have a lot of money and not a lot of roster spots to fill, that, oh my God, these X and X team are going to be able to spend big. I mean, I was talking a lot about the Carolina Hurricanes and what they were going to do this summer. Same thing with the Anaheim Ducks. That was a team that I was possibly keeping an eye out for when it comes to how much they are going to spend. That Anaheim was one of the teams that were rumored to get Mitch Marner as part of free agency, but Vegas and Toronto worked out on the sign and trade that did not give the Anaheim Ducks a chance to even get him. And crazy, Vegas actually posted a photo of Jack Eichel, Mitch Marner, and Noah Hannafin all together in the draft from 2015 in Florida, all three together, of what the future was going to be. If you were to go back there and would say that all three of us were going to be together in a team in Vegas that doesn't exist yet, something along those lines, it's crazy, because the Florida Panthers, two guys from the 2013 draft in Seth Jones and Alexander Barkov in the top 5. And then obviously we've talked about the story so many times about Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, and Aaron Ekblad being together from the 2014 draft. Vegas, even though they won the Stanley Cup in 2023, they are taking a little bit of a page off the Florida Panthers books on getting high picks from recent drafts and just trying to once again piece everything all together. But Florida is not the only one who threw a wrench in everybody's plans, but Vegas as well, getting the biggest fish of them all in Mitch Marner. And to think that there were times where I had my doubts where the Florida Panthers were going to sign all three of Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and Aaron Ekblad, because, I mean, a lot of the talk was, oh, Brad Marchand would be the perfect Leaf in order to help change their identity and help them get a lot closer to their goal, which, hey, the credit to the Leafs, they gave the Florida Panthers quite a challenge. And honestly, how they managed their cap from losing Mitch Marner is actually outstanding, bringing in a cheap contract in Nick Wall. I mean, it helps that John Tavares was able to accept less. Matthew Nyes is one of those players who now you could put them as part of their core four. I believe he was part of their core even before the extension. But the fact that he is on a cheap deal as well, it helps Bradshaw Living so much around what they're going to build there. But again, what's going to happen around the other teams in the NHL when it comes to the amount of space they have? I mean, Nashville has $10 million in space, but they have $9 million in buyout money right now from Matt Duchene's contract and Ryan Johansson. So that all, and the fact is that they flopped so much from free agency, it made them hesitate to go for a bigger splash even this year. And the biggest fish of them all right now at this point in time, as we are recording at 9:34 a.m. on a Thursday, is Nikolai Ehlers, which now he has pointed. Signs are pointing based on Frank Saravelli that it's either Washington or Carolina. Nick Ehlers is probably going to command somewhere around $8 million. Washington only has just under 7 with one roster spot left, so they're going to have to try to clear some cap in order to bring Nick Ehlers in. So you think as well of the other failures around the NHL who failed to really bring the big name player around their roster. In another one is Detroit. The Yzer plan is still in question on how they're going to build things around, and they're bringing back an older Patrick Kane again. And they brought the guy who was drafted a pick after him in James Van Riemsdyk. So Steve Yzerman is also taking a little bit of a page out of the Florida Panthers book, except these guys are a lot older. So it's crazy to think that a whole bunch of a good amount of players in one draft are coming together on one team as well. So it's just the Florida Panthers had multiple GMs across the NHL just scratching their heads and pivoting. Yeah, you have to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, as Bill Zito said, even when talking about how if he wasn't able to bring Aaron Ekblad and Brad Marchand back, but even myself, I wasn't expecting it. So thinking, okay, this is going to be an actual fun free agency. We are going to see teams get a little stupid, which we did see still, as we discussed in the example on the last episode with the Boston Bruins on what they're doing, LA Kings on what's happening there. So teams didn't get as stupid as they did last season when it comes to trying to fill the roster. It's and the teams trying to also get to the floor as well. Like San Jose is not right now, not at the cap floor. I suggested to JD Young, I actually texted him saying, how about the San Jose Sharks get Carey Price's LTIR money to get to the floor? And the Montreal Canadiens, it will be a win-win for them as they can get out of LTIR. They could accrue cap space as well as a team trying to take that next step. So I think that Carey Price's LTIR money should be moved there. And also the fact that is another team in Chicago, they are scheduled to have 70 million in cap space next year. They still have to pay Connor Bedard. Frank Nazar is going to be coming due for an extension very soon. Spencer Knight as well come next season. So they're going to have money to spend on some of their guys, but how are they going to fill the roster as well, which is another way of how the Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights have just thrown everything out of the GMs across the league of their plans. And let's look at some of the betting favorites for the entirety of the NHL, which we cannot be surprised with the Florida Panthers bringing the band back together and basically the same group with the exception of one or two guys, that they are going to be the favorite once again. Why wouldn't they be the favorite? And I know I'm looking a little bit ahead of myself here before I do talk about the betting odds. I'm very interested to see how the Panthers even manage the trade deadline coming up, which there's still a lot of questions with Matthew Tkachuk's LTIR, whether he comes back to begin with to start even in the middle of the season, which I still expect him to be back before the Olympics because he wants to literally fight for his country on the ice and win gold and get some revenge on Canada after what happened in the Four Nations. But I'm interested to see about how the Panthers fill their spots if they can't accrue LTIR money when even a lot of it when he does get back. So the betting favorites according to FanDuel look like this, and I'll start with the 6th favorite all the way to number 1. So the Colorado Avalanche are at a plus 950 along with the Dallas Stars, which the Colorado Avalanche are in a little bit of cap jail right now, which a whole bunch of contracts from after they won the Stanley Cup, which they don't have the luxury of the Florida Panthers of a rising cap like they did, like the Panthers have now. It was still a flat cap and a slow rise for the Avs coming out of their Stanley Cup run. So a lot of guys, 11 of them, make $4 million or more on their roster. That's having a hard time of just shipping guys out, which resulted in them not retaining Mikko Rantanen, trading him at way before the deadline. Actually, Dallas Stars 950. They were also in cap jail. They were also rumored to possibly trade Jason Robertson, but even though he has a 1 year left on his deal, and they are having a hard time filling in their spots. They gave Jamie Benn a 1 year deal with a bonus there, which will go on their cap next year. Oilers are plus 800, lost a lot of their depth, didn't really add a lot. They did add Andrew Mangiapane, a world championship hero for Team Canada just a few years ago. They added him to the mix. They actually added that while Jacob and I were recording, funny enough, on Tuesday night. VGK plus 800. That Marner acquisition is a big deal, but they're not one of the top favorites due to the fact that there's still questions around their defense. Carolina plus 750. It's crazy. I'm interested to see how the Keandre Miller acquisition fares for them as a guy who could really work for that Rod Brindamore system, as there were maybe the expectations were a little too high on what he could bring offensively. Great skater, does have a hard time taking care of the puck in his own end, which the Panthers really truly exposed them in the Eastern Conference Final in 2024. And there you go. The Florida Panthers plus 700 right now to three-peat, as Stanley Cup champions, and bringing the band back together. Usually you're going to have a great chance of doing it again. And sometimes when the team loses the Stanley Cup final, they are going to be the favorites going into the next year, which after the Panthers won in 2024, it was the Oilers who were the favorite, which mostly bringing the guys back together. But the bill came due for Edmonton. They still haven't solved that goaltending position on what they're going to do. And they're fourth favorites. Do they go after someone like Tristan Jarry at the trade deadline at a reduced price? Do they go after Artur Shilovs now that Vancouver has two of their top goaltenders locked up for a while there? So lots of things for Edmonton to figure out. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss cap casualties and the history of those trades and what the returns were and what we should expect if the Panthers are to move on from Evan Rodrigues. We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your personal CFO, give you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And I noticed that some subscriptions that I had because of Monarch Money, and it helped me cancel those subscriptions. So big shout out to Monarch Money for helping me figure those out. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's Monarch Money code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday, July 3rd edition of the show. And today this segment, we are going to discuss the history of cap casualty trades and what to expect if the Panthers eventually, because it's not if, but when they do. But a few housekeeping notes is the details of Jeff Petry's contract is officially made public. We spoke about the $775K contract with $300,000 in bonuses. So the milestones are 30, 40, 50, and 60 games played, $50K each. And then if the Panthers make the playoffs, it is going to be an additional $50K. And then if the Panthers win the Stanley Cup, it's going to be an additional $50K. So that's simple. Hope that's simple enough to understand. If all of those are met, or even some of those are met, those will go on next year's cap. So which will be honestly nothing for the Florida Panthers, even in great low risk, high reward contract for Jeff Petry coming into the mix. And also Brad Marchand's contract, we did make a little bit of a mistake discussing what the clauses look like. Puckpedia originally had it as a no move clause to modify no trade in 2029, but it's a full no move clause the entirety of the deal. So So that's you guys can check Puckpedia for all the clauses there for each contract for each team. But hard decisions are coming. This happens to every Stanley Cup champion whenever they win, and this isn't new. Which it's going to be in with the Panthers. Thankfully, with once again in the rising cap, they'll have to make less of these difficult decisions than what other teams have had to do in the past. So let's discuss a little bit about the history of recent cap casualty trades that recent Stanley Cup champions and even Stanley Cup runner-ups had to do. So recently, the when the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup in both the bubble and even in the shortened season a few years ago, the Tyler Johnson was one of those players who had a $5 million cap hit and was traded to the Chicago Blackhawks, and it was worth a second round pick and Brent Seabrook's LTIR money. He hadn't played hockey in a while. And that was just money that the Tampa Bay Lightning were getting in order to still be cap compliant, and but they were unable to accrue any additional cap space for the deadline. But they still got Tyler Johnson's cap hit off the books, which the bill was coming due for them, and a slow rise. Ryan McDonough was another one in the year that they lost the Stanley Cup final in 2022 to the Colorado Avalanche, which McDonough originally signed a 7-year deal the year before that his contract expired when he was traded from the New York Rangers to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it traded and then came back, but was originally acquired for players, but no picks. One of them was Philippe Myers as one of them. And then when they reacquired him, the Tampa Bay Lightning were the ones who had to pay a second and a seventh round pick in order to get a fourth. So with the lack of rise in cap, the Tampa Bay Lightning were not going to get anything of value back, as they did not have the leverage there for them. Colorado, crazy enough, if there's one example of a team that the Panthers that this current state of the Panthers are trying to do, kind of like a run it back. The Colorado Avalanche, when they won in 2022, they, for the most part, ran it back for them, which they acquired Arturi Lenkinen from the Montreal Canadiens in a deal that helped them win the Stanley Cup. Which another one that they got was Josh Manson. They extended him after Andrew Cogliano. After they got him from San Jose, they also extended him short term. But it also came at a price with losing Nazem Kadri, which they weren't able to afford. Alex Newhook, it took a few years before he was a little bit of trade bait, but Alex Newhook, who it was a second line center for the Montreal Canadiens the last few years, he was traded for a first, and that was the first round pick that Florida traded to Montreal for the Ben Sherratt deal. So Montreal made use of that as far as Alex Newhook, a Stanley Cup champion, trying to help some young kids get through to that next step as well. And Colorado ended up paying the price later with losing Mikko Rantanen, but like I said, they're in a lot of cap trouble, which a lot of people criticize the Avalanche for trading Mikko Rantanen, and you were better off probably allowing Rantanen to at least finish the season and then letting him walk, as opposed to trading him and then making your team a lot worse. Then I think it's almost worth letting him walk in free agency if it gives you a better chance to win the cup there. And then all the money that they used for him, Martin Necas is just over $6 million, and then re-signing Brock Nelson at a $7 million deal for a third line center. That's two players versus one if you were to re-sign for $12 million in Colorado, but still they're having a hard time filling their depth right now, as like I said, 11 players are making $4 million or more for the Avalanche there. So hopefully I'm sure Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic are hoping that the rise in cap will help them, and along with expiring deals will help them get things settled there for their cap situation. Another one for when it comes to cap clearing trades was Riley Smith, former Panther, acquired by Vegas in the expansion draft, which Vegas sent a second round pick, received a second round pick and a conditional fifth to the New York Rangers from the New York Rangers to trade Riley Smith to them. That's what they got for them. There was still a rise in cap at the time when the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup. And that same year, the Panthers, who lost the Stanley Cup against Vegas, traded Anthony Duclair for a fifth and Stephen Lawrence, who was a big part of the Panthers' bottom six for the Panthers and on their way to winning it in 2024. And most of Florida's losses in 2024 were mostly free agent signings. When you think of the biggest example of them all in Brandon Montour, so it wasn't really cap clearing trades that the Panthers had to do, and still able to re-sign Sam Reinhart at a really incredible deal, which his floor is around 40 goals on an $8 million cap hit. It's just incredible work that Bill Zito continues to do. And the runner up that year, Edmonton Oilers, Ryan McLeod, who was their second line center, who was making $2.1 million, was traded for a first round prospect in Matthew Savoie from the Buffalo Sabres. It's another one of those high draft picks that Buffalo gave up in order to try to at least restock a little bit of the farm, but it hasn't resulted in playoff appearances as they're going on 14 years. Maybe it looks like it's about to be 15. And now they traded JJ Peterka to the Utah Mammoth there. So ouch. So what do we expect from the trade market when Evan Rodriguez's floor is around just under half a point a game? The flexibilities go up and down the lineup. He's got a whole bunch of experience playing with guys like a Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Alexander Barkov, and there's a rising cap for the NHL. And everyone wants a piece of the Panthers. Everyone wants a little bit of what the Stanley Cup champions have. And Evan Rodrigues is one of those players who is going to help a team that is trying to teach some young players there. And for the Panthers, this is one of the rare occasions where Bill Zito does not have the leverage. He's had leverage all throughout this free agency period with the pending free agents of Bennett, Marchand, and Ekblad, but this is the one rare occasion where he doesn't really have all the leverage. Teams are looking around the Panthers and saying, hey, we see that you're over the cap. We see that you're going to have to make some tough decisions here. So we know that the easiest contract to move is either an Evan Rodrigues or an Eetu Luostarinen. So people are going to try to lowball the Panthers here. But I don't think it's going to be as lowball as we've seen with the example of, like I mentioned earlier in this segment, the Ryan McDonagh trade, 4 players. But I don't think it's going to be the example of getting later round picks. I do think that there is value in what Evan Rodrigues brings to a lineup trying to take that next step. So Bill Zito is probably going to try to fish a second round pick, but because of the fact that it's a dire need for him to clear cap space, he's probably going to end up getting somewhere around the 3rd or 4th round pick. So that's what we could expect from a cap casualty in Evan Rodrigues going into this offseason. So that's my expectation for them. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to go away from the transactional part and the business side of it and how Bill Zito must do right by Evan Rodrigues. We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Thursday, July 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. So these last 4 years have been some of the greatest times to be a Florida Panthers fan. 3 finals appearances, a President's Trophy, sold out barns every single night, and players that a lot of fans can attach to. And here's the great thing is about re-signing some of the guys that they got in Ekblad, Bennett, and Marchand is the fact that it's funny because I saw a whole bunch of fans buying Brad Marchand jerseys as soon as he got traded for, and then in the Stanley Cup final. And the one thing that I was thinking of was this. Man, a lot of these guys are going to be spending all their hard-earned money for a guy who's a rental. That was my thinking. And I'm very hesitant when it comes to purchasing jerseys for guys who you don't know what their future looks like here. And now it's looking a lot of the fans purchasing those. It's going to last for a long time. And hey, you see still quite a few Claude Giroux jerseys in the barn. I'm just thinking, man, I just can't bring myself to that if there's nothing beyond a certain amount of time. But hey, congrats to if you're a fan listening to this and you have a Brad Marchand jersey, congrats to you on taking that gamble and it working out for you. But when it comes to sacrifices that the Panthers need to make, and Evan Rodrigues has been the name that we've been mentioning. It's been all across Twitter as well. And I remember around the trade deadline last year when things weren't going right with the Nashville Predators, that one of the things that were reported is that they are going to treat Ryan O'Reilly like he has a no move clause because they value him that much. The leadership that he brings, he's a Conn Smythe winner. And they're treating him as such. Evan Rodrigues, as far as his deal, what he has with the Florida Panthers, it was a 4-year deal worth 12 million, 3 million AAV for him. They also need to treat him as if he has a no trade clause. And the why it's so important is because of this lasting impression. And I think it's so important that when it comes to reputation, present, and future, if you want to acquire, the culture's already great in South Florida. And it starts at the top with Vinny Viola. Alexander Barkov is the player on the ice who is the biggest example, the guy who's not doesn't talk too much, but allows his play to dictate everything. But with Evan Rodrigues being the ultimate teammate, starting off on the fourth line, going up on the top, and then eventually going on the Bennett Tkachuk line, and allowing those guys to do their thing. And while the opposition has maybe focused too much on the other guys, that he's been able to pounce multiple times in multiple playoff runs, which the 2024 Stanley Cup final is one that is going to be memorable for me watching the Florida Panthers. Especially there was one where Sam Bennett dumps the puck, gets it by Cody Ceci, and he gets it to Evan Rodrigues and he scores. I believe that was in game 2. And then the Bouchard turnover, he gives it right to Evan Rodrigues, and then Evan Rodrigues is like, I'm going to shoot this, and then he gets it through. That was in the both were in the 2024 final. But here's also why you need to do right by Evan Rodrigues is to end the uncertainty sooner rather than later. Because even if the Panthers do have the LTIR space with Matthew Tkachuk, which we still don't know if he's actually going to get surgery, but all signs are pointing that he will. The Panthers need to allow Evan Rodrigues to get acclimated to his new team, his new city, a full training camp so that he can be his best self whenever he starts with his new team. And it could be at Toulouse-Thornton as well. But I'm going to be assuming that it's going to be Evan Rodrigues. And if it ends up being Etu, then we'll discuss it then. But I think Etu is way more valuable for the Florida Panthers on what he brings coming into next year versus Evan Rodrigues. But if he were to go through a full training camp in Florida and knowing this uncertainty and just the calls between the agent of what's going to happen, Darren Ferris is his agent. He represents both Sam Bennett and Mitch Marner. I think this is also why you need to do right by the player and not dragging this. Which, looking at the rise in cap, the Panthers have $23.12 million in cap space going into next season. 14 players are under contract right now, next year. So that averages around $2.56 million for next year's cap, which even if you bring back the entire fourth line, they won't make 2.5 million. if they were to perform well, you can give them a slight raise at a 1.5 maybe if you like what you see. But at the same time, you still got to be able to readjust things on the fly. So Evan Rodrigues will still be under contract. If you want to bring him back, you have the possibility to, but it just doesn't work out in the short term right here, right now for the Panthers. So there's still that opportunity for the Panthers in order to still build things around the roster and also give, once again, I'm going to say this one more time, lasting impression. And that matters. And that speaks to the rest of the NHL on how they treat their players going out the door, which Jim Nill, the Jim Gregory Award winner, he did right by Mason Marchment, sending him to Seattle, a no state income tax state, which he's not going to lose a lot of money, and he's going to get more of an opportunity there as the Dallas Stars were up against the cap. So, Bill Zito, he knows what to do. He's not ignorant to this. He has a relationship with these players. He's gonna help Evan Rodrigues out, get to a better situation. But he's not just going to send him to Chicago or San Jose just for the heck of it. He's going to check out the landscape. He's going to see everything of what is going on around what other teams have, and he's going to see, hey, there's a chance for Erod to play a big role. I mean, looking at some of the cap sheets for the following teams that are contending, Winnipeg, they have 3 roster spots to fill with $19 million in space. Yeah, they still have to try to re-sign Nikolai Ehlers, but that's a possible destination. Utah, they already signed 2 other Florida Panthers there. Why not the third one? As far in this case of a trade. So why not them as far as a team that Evan Rodrigues could possibly go to? So we'll see on how Bill Zito manages this, but I hope that Zito doesn't send them to a team that is struggling to find their way. So that's where I stand based on doing good for 2025-26, but also for the player who was a big contributor, who is going to get a welcome back video and is going to be embraced and walking together forever with this Florida Panthers team on not 1, but 2 runs. I'm excited to see where Evan Rodrigues is going to thrive, flourish, whatever synonym you want to name here. So that's my thoughts on it, on the whole Evan Rodrigues situation. So now you guys know what the expectation of mine is on what they're going to get in return. So now we have to wait and see. Do they drag it out into training camp, or do they get it done somewhere all around the summer as teams are still trying to figure out this as the first wave of free agency has come and mostly gone. So thank you guys for listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tomorrow on the show, we are going to discuss Mackie Samoskevich as the last guy on the roster to be signed to a deal. What is the most reasonable contract that the Florida Panthers could give him? And how much term should they give Mackie Samoskevich? We'll discuss that more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including the Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.